probably followed, one of the things they came up with early on was closing post offices. Well, that is a very, very difficult and unpopular thing, because if the community loses its post office, they basically lose their identity. And so that's the reason why I've always thought it's the post office was probably a pretty good investment, because they're probably not going to close it. The Postal Service, and I've had, I guess I was really disappointed in the way they've kind of managed things the last couple of years. They've kind of been in a panic mode, and they've done kind of irrational, stupid things. For instance, they closed a bunch of sorting centers, even though they had long-term contracts where those people had to be paid anyway. So they reduced the convenience and reduced how quickly and they did that, I think, last year or the year before.
They left Sioux City, right?
Sioux City was one of them, but I think Fort Dodge was another. There's several. The state doesn't have a real role there, but obviously we do have an interest in seeing that our constituents, our citizens of our state, are able to get timely delivery of their mail. You know, that's an important thing, and yet I really believe the Congress is the one that's going to have to work out this situation.
Well, one of the arguments that Mike Branstad was making at the last legislative coffee here was that a lot of our apartment buildings pay commercial property taxes.
They do. Apartments are treated as commercial property.
Right, but there was no talk, and I didn't hear you talking, Mike, he was talking about this is a good deal for people who rent rather than buy a home. But
It's not a good deal.
Well,
Because
I mean,
the
the rollback is what he's talking about. But I didn't hear anything that would require the landowner to reimburse that to the renter.
Most of you can talk your Main Street businesses. Most of your people that have commercial property, the landlord will have in the lease a deal where their property taxes are essentially paid by the tenant. And that's why this is so important to reduce that commercial property tax, because for your startup businesses that are tenants, they are paying the property tax essentially.
So really, a lot of this goal of this commercial property tax, this commercial property reform, is to lower the hurdles for people trying to enter the field.
So what you do is you're going to have, subject to property taxes, half of the property is residential. In Council Bluffs, it's probably higher than half, because you don't have the industrial base that some other cities do. Consequently, the biggest hit, if we don't do anything, is the increase in the share of the property that's subject to property tax for residential. My proposal limits that to say that it can't go up more than 2%. And the mistake was made in the 70s. We tied residential and ag together. We should have tied them all together. We wouldn't have this problem with commercial if it stayed in sync with residential and ag. So now what we're going to do is we want to tie them all together so there's no shift between classes of property, and then reduce how much it go up to 2%. And by fully funding the homestead and elderly and disabled tax credit, and then limit it to 2%, there should be a reduction in residential property taxes, as well as commercial and industrial.
How can you do that now? I mean, you just said last year that wasn't part of it.
Well, because the
It's
state's in
surplus.
such a strong financial position. And it's not, it's just well, first of all, we have reduced the size and cost of state government significantly. We're down 850 employees. We've already reached an agreement with the SPOC union. There will be no increase in their base pay for the next 2 years, only bonuses of 1% twice a year. They've also agreed to 20% of their health insurance that would be paid by the employees, but if they're in a wellness program, they get cash back and reduce it down to maybe more like 15%. We're hopeful to do something similar with the rest of the state employees, which can save the state a significant amount of money. And we have got that money set aside so that we can fully fund these tax credits and provide the reimbursements to local government. And if you look at our education reforms, we also phase that in, and that goes to 187 million. But we projected this all out. In the 5th year, we still have a budget where we're spending less than we're taking in. This is what business says all the time. This is what they don't do in Illinois. That's why they're broke. That's why they have all this huge deficit. They're $4 billion behind. They're paying their bills and time and stuff like that. The federal government is even worse, but that's another story. But that's the reason why I feel so confident we have the resources and the ability to do that, and we're going to manage it to make sure that all the decisions that are made, and I told this to the legislature, we're going to look at through a 5-year lens of, does this balance out every year out to 5 years?
How do the cities feel about your latest plan?
A lot better. We're getting good support, I think, from the cities and the counties on this issue. Last year they were concerned, they were we were saying, well, they're also going to get the growth. So now they're not only going to get the growth, they're going to get fully funded. They're going to get the growth, limited to 2% on residential, and it's limited to 2% growth, but so they'll get the growth plus the new. See, they're automatically going to get an increase in residential and agriculture. Because agriculture isn't a big thing in the cities, but it is in the counties. You see, our first goal is to pass education reform through the House here in the month of February. And hopefully the Senate will then, the Senate's already working on it in committee. So we're very hopeful that that can be approved in early March. Then property tax relief. And then the third one will be the focus on our goal of being the healthiest state and increasing residencies for physicians, the rural physician loan repayment program, and our certificate of merit to help make Iowa more attractive for doctors. So we have a very focused, very limited agenda. 3 major items.
Not to play the devil's advocate, but I mean, property tax relief has been really discussed for years and years.
But now I was in a position to really do something. And this is an issue that's been a real problem for a long time. And and that's why I came back and ran for governor, because I wanted to get the state's education system back on track. We've been best in America. We've dropped to middle of the pack. We want to be back best. And I think our property taxes are one of the big impediments to growing business and jobs in our state. When you talk to Iowans, the property tax is the most unpopular and unfair tax we've got, and especially hurts our ability to grow good business and jobs.
But it's, obviously it hurts cities like Council Bluffs because, business wants to come here, they'll simply go stay in Omaha and
Right.
have people here work, work there.
Well, this will make it a lot more attractive to locate here, because we will systematically reduce that commercial property tax, which has been a real impediment. And there's no question in western Iowa it's a big problem because we're competing with lower tax states. When you're competing with South Dakota, North Dakota, and Nebraska, Kansas, those are all very competitive states in terms of their tax structure. And that's why being competitive in this is really important, especially in this part of the state. So it reduces it from 100% of market value to 80%, but the state picks up, so whatever the loss is to the cities, to the counties, the state fully reimburses 100% of that. Plus, whatever new residential or commercial comes on board, they get that too. So there's no loss, they get a gain. As you know, China is now purchasing more soybeans than all the rest of the countries in the world combined. We made major sales when Xi Jinping was here a year ago. What's even more significant is that's going to grow. Also their corn imports, their pork imports. These are all things that Iowa leads the nation in, is corn, soybeans, and pork. And the demand from China is going to continue to grow. So I think that's not only that, then we have ethanol and renewable fuels, but we also have biodegradable plastics, we have feed and food and pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals, all of which we make from what we produce.
Yesterday there was a talk about, I get the guy in the county, I don't know, wants to do the tax rebate or whatever. We should take $500 million a year. Any chance that would happen?
No, I doubt that the Senate's gonna do that. You know, Senate Democrats aren't interested in reducing the income tax. I tried to put together a program that I thought had a chance to get approved through both the House and Senate. And I am sympathetic about reducing the income tax as well, but I think the property tax is the biggest challenge we have right now. Iowa is one of the few states that has full federal deductibility, and so when federal taxes go up, for the people that are making over 400,000 or 450,000, Iowa taxes go down. So our effective rate now in Iowa is lower than Kansas and Nebraska. Unlike 2 years ago where I said, you know, we had a big projected deficit, we had all this one-time money used for ongoing expenses. We have basically, in what I thought could take 4 years, corrected it in 2. And now we're in a strong position, I think, to be able to not only do education reform, but also property tax relief, and be in a very sustainable position going forward.
Speak a little about your education reform plans.
We want to replace allowable growth with supplemental state aid. That's really important for communities like Council Bluffs because allowable growth has a property tax component. And we want to replace that with 100% state aid, not only for this coming year, but for into the future. But what I've said is, I don't want to spend the whole session fighting between the House and the Senate over funding. I want to instead get education reform approved. I've said I want to see the education reforms first, but if they want to put it all in one bill and include the supplemental state aid for schools in addition to the education reforms, provided it's something that fits within the budget, we could do that and everybody wins. So I'm very hopeful that will happen, and hopefully the House passes it in February, hopefully the Senate passes it soon thereafter, and can be accomplished by March. Then we can go to work on the property tax reduction.
But there seems to be two major differences between like the Iowa, you know, the Republican-led House and the Democratic Senate. I mean, it's like...
Well, there's more than a few differences.
Well, it's like...
The Democrats are saying, well, we want to take that out of the taxpayers' trust fund. Well, the House will never go with that. But we can't do it out of the general fund of the state. We're in a good position with that ending balance to be able to do that and afford that. I just want to make sure that that with our 5-year lens, that it all balances out over that period of time.
But isn't there a concern that, you know, once you kind of start dipping into the till, that it's kind of easy to keep doing that? And then
If
next
you
thing know,
do what they did in the past, and you say, yeah, we're going to spend every dime we can get our hands on this year, not consider the future, we're not going to let them do that. This is the thing that's really important, and it's the difference between the way we're managing and the way it's been done in the past. It's not a 1-year budget. It's a 2-year budget with a 5-year projection. And I won't approve anything that puts us into a negative situation even in the 5th year. So that's why I'm very willing to look at some kind of tax rebate, but not as massive a tax rebate as the House may be talking about.
You were quoted yesterday, I think, saying that you're against the Medicaid expansion.
Right.
How can you say you want this to be the healthiest state when we've got so many uninsured people?
Well, we're one of the lowest states in terms of uninsured. We're one of the lowest in the country. And that's how we did welfare reform when I was governor before. We did waivers and we found better ways to do it and to be more efficient. The problem with Medicaid is it's a 1960s program. It's outmoded and it's extremely expensive. It's like a rusting out Cadillac that's going to go broke here. It's going to just break down because it's unaffordable and unsustainable. They were going to mandate the states were going to have to add all these people to Medicaid, so they'd have these people that are presently uninsured that are charity care that would all of a sudden be covered. The problem is the United States Supreme Court said no. They cannot force the states to do this. This is a choice matter for the states. And so a lot of states, led by Republican governors, Bobby Jindal's the chairman of the Republican governors, we have 30 Republican governors. And most of them have said, we would rather get a waiver and have more flexibility and take our own approach. We have a goal of being the healthiest state. But if we're gonna be a healthy state, we've gotta get people to take ownership of their own health. My experience at Des Moines University was, if you can do health risk assessments and convince people not to use tobacco products and to focus on things they can do to reduce their risk factors, be it cholesterol or high blood pressure or things like that, you can make a real difference. But that's the kind of stuff we need to do. And so what we're saying is, we are going to be asking HHS to give us a waiver. We're one of the few states where state employees pay nothing towards their health insurance. Now, we're in the process of, the lieutenant governor and I and many of our department heads voluntarily paying 20% already. By the way, federal employees all pay 25%. They already pay 25%, federal employees do.
All federal employees?
Yeah, they all pay 25%. In most other states, we're one of only 6 states where they pay 0. We're hopeful we can get that worked out through the bargaining with the rest of state employees, especially since we're one of only 6 states. Federal employees are paying more than that. Most people in the private sector, I'm sure you're paying more than 20% here. I know at Des Moines University, our employees were paying 30%.
How much would that save the state if AFSCME agreed to pay 20%? Or
If we did it for everybody, it's over $100 million. So it's real money. It's very significant. And the other thing we got stuck with is, Culver gave them that early retirement opportunity in 2010. But if they did it, they got a bonus of $1,000 for every year they worked for the state up for 25 years to be paid over 5 years. And by the way, that's not in his budget, but in our budget over these 5-year periods, so we're paying it now. Plus, we have to pay the health insurance for those people that took early retirement. The cost of that is about $17,000 a year. I can't help it. I wasn't governor at the time. I would have never agreed to those things. But I have to balance the budget that we have today.
what are we looking at on the gas tax as we look at long-term projections, obviously? How that's a fund that definitely needs some work. I would assume you would agree with that.
It's a very difficult and controversial issue because there's still a lot of people, a lot of working people that are hurting. There's a significant opposition to it. Now, going to the future, you're right. And this thing is going to get worse because people are getting fuel-efficient vehicles. You got electrical vehicles. You've got hybrids. I think you're going to see massive amount of trucks that are going to convert to natural gas. So they're going to have to come up with dealing with a fair, and I think you got to call it a motor fuel user fee rather than a gas tax, because it needs to really, the people that use our roads, there needs to be an equitable distribution for all, whether it's a natural gas powered truck or whether it's an electric car, whatever. They all need to pay their fair share towards the maintenance of our roads, and that's the challenge. Fuel was a nice way to do it because then the people that use the roads use it. If you do it strictly with registration, it then only hits the people that live in Iowa, not the one traveling through.
Sure.
So I don't know there's a perfect answer to that. I first want to address the property tax issue. I want to assure people their taxes are going to go down, not up. And if we get the property tax reduction, I'm willing to consider some change in the user fee.
So that's something we could see this year, even.
It could happen this year if we get the property tax reduction first.
Okay.
But I've said I don't want to even consider it until we've done that.